There was a very good talk on the metaphysics of illusion with funny triangles. We will now hear from Stephen on the topic of the indispensable steps from illusion to wisdom. Go ahead, Stephen.
Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Pierre, Jerry, and welcome, friends, to this talk and presentation on the art of self-actualization. We'll begin by getting grounded in some terms. The art of self-actualization, like any art, is an acquired skill that leads to right action, right outcomes based on a body of knowledge. In this case, the desired end in view is the highest level of psychological development based on the application of theosophical principles. Self-actualization is the internal need, desire, impulse to fulfill, to reach that highest state of awareness. And self-realization is the actual achievement and understanding of those potentialities. As we have heard and as we will see, illusion is the greatest obstacle along the path of self-actualization, self-realization. But illusion is a necessary part of the process. And the more we understand illusion and learn how to work with it, the better we can transcend illusion and raise ourselves to wisdom, self-realization. So this talk will cover the indispensable steps from illusion to wisdom. Mastery of illusion being an important part of the process. So this is a science in the mastery of illusion based on understanding the various classes of illusion, their causes and effects and influences on the mind. But it is also an art, being aware, learning to recognize illusion and being able to respond to it wisely. Illusion, then, as we have seen, can be a mask, a veil, which obscures or hides what is real. But illusion is also anything that has a beginning and an end. It is changeable, transient, subject to change, and we can consider that as illusion. As we heard, Maya or illusion is a creative, perceptive, self-identifying aspect of the mind, but it is also a means by which we can learn from those things that we create and experience. So what do we mean by absolute truth? Because we know there's absolute truth and relative truth. Absolute truth in this sense will stand for spiritual wisdom, which is knowledge of that which is eternal, timeless, and unconditioned. And ignorance would be its opposite. Illusion would be the result of being stuck in ignorance. So actually, in this process, we come out of illusion by degrees. We come out of ignorance by degrees. We realize truth by degrees, and we master illusion by degrees. So illusion is a complex. Its mastery is by degrees. As we said, knowledge of spiritual truth, knowledge of these universal principles is the highest degree of self-realization. Spiritual knowledge is seeing the self in all things in the self. It's the highest degree of self-actualization, seeing that our highest potentialities are that of equal-mindedness, of freedom from illusion, devotion, and acting upon that which is real. And so in mastering illusion, there is the study of philosophy, the universal principles by which the mind becomes eventually aware that there is no separateness in reality, and the practice of virtue, which gradually frees the mind from the snares of illusion. So let's begin with this key idea. It's a quote from Emerson. Fiction reveals truth that reality obscures. And what he was driving at is imaginary literature and even poetry is the writer's, the artist's attempt to make us aware of truths by stories and otherwise images that being caught up in this subjective world of existence, we can't see. It's obscured. In fact, any art, creative art, is the use of images, illusionary images, to allude to or express truths. And we might look at myth as a story, a sequence of images or illusions which are more than what they appear to be on the surface. Within the myth is a truth. And the myth, through imagination and memory, allows us to preserve, to use, to share, to teach these truths whenever we want to. And so the remaining slides will be our effort to utilize our imagination and memory to see if we can use illusion to find wisdom. And each one of these steps will be represented by illusion, which not only will represent the hidden wisdom, but the step itself, and will help us remember it. And one can only point out the steps in order, each one must travel the path for themselves. So as we go through these slides, if you can take a moment to imagine them in your own mind, form the image in your own mind, there'll be much benefit to you from this presentation. And as you will see at the end, there is a reward for that effort. So we'll go to the first step. The first step, or real idea we have to grasp out of illusion, is things are not what they seem to be. Illusion veils what is true and is real. And what image, what illusion are we going to use to remember whenever we need to this first idea? And we've chosen the illusion you see before you of the sun. Why the sun? Well, we have one sun in our solar system, so it's a good image of the one. And when we think about the sun, this is the image of the sun as seen from space. We see the chromosphere. But this is not the sun that we see as we look at the sun from our atmosphere. And even though we may not see the sun through the clouds or by an eclipse or through the rotation of the earth, we know it's there. And even this vision of the sun from space is not the sun, the physical sun as it really is. This is only the outer garb. We don't see the inner internal energies. As a matter of fact, Theosophy would tell us that the visible sun is but an illusionary reflection, a Maya, if you will, of the true spiritual sun. And in that sense, the true spiritual sun is like our own higher self, which we are trying to actualize and realize. It's that part of ourselves which does not usually appear. We're not usually aware of. That's what we're trying to discover and realize. And it certainly does not appear to others. It's veiled. So things are not what they seem to be. But most people in general see what things seem to be. They don't see what things actually are because they see what they expect to see, they see what they want to see, or they see what they are fooled to see. So whenever we want to remember this first idea, we'll think of the sun, which we don't really see when we look out in the sky as it really is. So it reminds us that things are not what they seem to be. The second truth is that we stand in a world of illusion, which is self-created and necessary. We can't escape the illusion. We need it. We depend on it. We need this world. And yet we are continuously self-deceived by it, as some of the examples that the previous presenter stated. So we chose 2 feet or 2 pairs of shoes because there are 2 feet and therefore 2 pairs of shoes. And that image in our mind will always remind us of this second idea, that we stand with our feet, our shoes in a world of illusion. And we see here 2 people holding hands, standing on the ice. They need that ice, that temporary expression of water in a certain state to stand. And yet, in the process, they see their shadows reflected, the illusionary shadow of themselves in the water. So this will remind us that we live in this world of illusion. We cannot escape it, but we have to learn to recognize it and rise above it. It will also remind us about the twofold nature of mind and illusion that we heard of. We began with that quotation from the Bhagavad Gita, I am born through my own Maya, illusion, the mystic power of self-ideation, the eternal thought and the eternal mind. So Maya is a cosmic power of ideation or thought. It is through this power that the universe and ourselves come in and maintain their appearance. So illusion is necessary for the world to exist, but we create it. And yet, it is also very deceptive. And we learn this from the voice of the silence. The mind is the thought producer, that which awakes illusion. The mind is the great slayer of the real. So this too, this standing in the necessity of illusion, seeing the illusion, will remind us of the dual nature of mind and the dual nature of illusion. If you can remember anything from this presentation, remember this third truth about illusion. And you'll remember it by the image of the traffic light with its red, yellow, and green signal. Because it refers to, and it's going to help us remember, the 3 basic skills in the mastery of illusion. Stop, observe, and recognize the illusion. Take the position within the silence and privacy of one's inner being to be the observer and observe that which is going on within and without yourself. Detect the difference. The observer is permanent, enduring. That which is observed is changeable, transient, and illusionary. So we cannot escape the illusions of life, but we can certainly stop and observe and recognize them. And having done that, we come to this yellow light to wait. Proceed with caution. while we're reflecting on the cause and the effect and the influence of the illusion we are seeing. And we'll learn more about that as we go along. And having done then we can go act with knowledge, self-reliance, and virtue. So these three basic skills will help us, if nothing else does, to be able to begin to master illusion, to stop, observe, wait, reflect, and then act with knowledge and reliance. The fourth truth of illusion is to remember that there are four truths of illusion on the road to self-actualization. And actually, it is with these four truths that we can reach, by the power of illusion, self-actualization and wisdom. And so to help us remember that, we're going to imagine in our mind this automobile or any four-wheeled vehicle, a means of transportation that depends on four wheels. And whenever we think or see that, that's going to remind us of the four truths of illusion. And what are the four truths of illusion? Well, it sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The four noble truths of Buddhism. So we're going to paraphrase those in the context of the four truths of illusion. And the first truth is life is full of illusion. And the second truth is the cause of illusion is ignorance. The third truth is illusion and ignorance ceases with knowledge. And the fourth truth is that there is a path to knowledge, which is acquiring the skills in the self-mastery of illusion. So there you have it, the four truths of illusion. All we need is an operating manual. And for those who are familiar with it, the voice of the silence is that kind of manual for the benefit of those who really are seeking true self-actualization, true self-realization. In fact, the word illusion appears 30 times in the voice of the silence, and it's referred to on every page, if not most pages. The first fragment helps us recognize the three halls of experience by which we learn to recognize the cause and effects of different illusion. The second fragment teaches us the path of renunciation and liberation by which we can transcend illusion. There are two paths to transcend illusion: liberation and renunciation. And the third fragment makes us aware of those virtues by which the heart can become gradually free from the snares of illusion, and the mind can gradually transcend illusion and acquire wisdom. So in the voice of the silence, it says, "Art thou not aware of the powers of self? If not, thou art lost." So we need to know the powers of self. And so we come to the fifth great idea about illusion. We need to grasp the illusion, to understand it, and let the illusion go, to transcend it. And the image that's going to help us remember this fifth truth is the image of the hand, a very appropriate image, illusionary image, because it has 5 fingers. And with these 5 fingers, we are able to grasp objects and let them go. We can, well, as we know, those that are familiar with Theosophy, the 5th principle is commonly referred to as mind. So the mind itself must have the power to grasp and understand illusion, as well as the power to let it go. And as we do that, we see that there are two reasons by which we are bound and deceived by, controlled by illusion, as we study with our mind, as we grasp it to understand it. And one is the power of the mind to self-identify with that which is temporary. The second being the influence of the passions and desires and sensations and impressions that bring up within us a desire for personal self-gratification, of reward. And so to let go of the illusion, we have to use that self-identification power of mind to focus on that in us which is eternal and real. The self within we identify as I, or I am, that part of our identity which has no attributes, or to be aware of ourselves as the enduring perceiver, the observer that is the same throughout experience. And by focusing on that, the mind soon learns to identify and become one like that which it focuses on. The second way in which we can let go is by renouncing the desire for personal gratification or reward for what we do, and at the same time devote ourselves to the betterment of ourselves and humanity through devotion, through sacrifice. We'll come more to that later. But the important point here is that the hand, the fifth principle, the mind, five fingers, whatever it is going to remind us of this fifth principle: to grasp illusion and to let illusion go in order to transcend it. So let's come then to our next slide. The sixth truth also comes from a statement in the voice of the silence, the sweet-tongued voices of illusion. And we chose as an illusionary image to help us recall this truth, the sweet-tongued voices of illusion, is a six-pack of soda or any sweet beverage. And you'll notice that this six-pack of soda is incorporated or included or all encompassed in a case or a pack. Now, as you look at this six-pack, you either see 2 rows of 3 bottles, or you see 3 rows of 2 bottles. So we can classify the different kinds of illusion, the various sweet-tongued voices of illusion, as 2 illusions that affect or we experience through our senses, 2 illusions or kinds of illusions we experience through our desires, and 2 illusions or kinds of illusions we experience through the mind. Or going the other way, 2 rows of 3, we can look at 3 kinds of illusion that we perceive through the influence of our body, 3 kinds of illusions that we experience through our soul. So what is the 7th? What is the all-inclusive, the all-incorporating, the synthesis of all these 6? It's the illusion of spirit. And we'll see that there is an illusion relating to spiritual existence. So, the 2 illusions of the senses are those that arise first from physical and psychic impressions relating to sensory impressions from the physical and astral plane. Let's just give a quick example of that. The chair you're sitting on, the table you're leaning on, seems to be solid to you. It feels solid to your sense of feeling, solid to your sense of sight, but we know, science knows that it's actually fully in motion. There's more space between the particles and atoms that make up the chair. There's more vibratory energy and motion than there is actually mass and solidity. But to our senses, it appears to be solid and inert. Well, that's the kind of illusion of the senses. But there's also an illusion, or the second kind of illusion related to the senses, that comes from the natural differentiation and diversity that occurs in life. And this kind of illusion is also very, very common. It's the illusion where we spend so much focus on the differentiations that we fail to see the forest through the trees, or we become so specialized in a particular area of sensual sensation, discovery, and experience that we fail to see the general picture. And so specialists can be blind to the larger picture or to the perception of others because they are focused on a particular expression of. It's like the old story of the blind men, each perceiving a certain part of the elephant and believing that's what the elephant is, and they don't see the bigger picture. So these are the two illusions of the senses. And then we have the two illusions of the desire. And the third of these illusions really is a transition. It's an illusion from the senses, it's illusion from the feelings. And this is the illusions brought up by the experience of the pairs of opposites: heat, cold, pleasure and pain, light and dark. And what we find is that we find certain of these sensations to be very pleasurable and some of them to be very painful. So we find ourselves desiring to avoid one at all costs and to acquire the other at all costs. And that can overshadow, obscure to our mind what is really important, what is really needed, what is really necessary to perform our duty. And so that's that kind of illusion. And so these three together, the two illusions of the senses and the desires of the senses and the illusions of the senses and feelings, make up what we call the three illusions of the body, or objective existence. And then the fourth illusion, which also is related to desire, is obviously the desire for personal self-gratification. We experience something as being pleasurable, and we want to initiate actions to achieve the gratification of that desire. And the effect of that, though, is once again, it obscures the reality of what we really should be trying to achieve that's valuable, that's necessary, that's meaningful in the performance of our duty. And also, even though we may desire to experience and achieve that which seems important to us, seems real to us, if that's thwarted, if that's threatened, or that disappears because it's transient, it's everything else in life, we find it results in fear, hate, envy, greed, anger, and maybe if we achieve it, a moment of euphoria that passes quickly, only for the desire to experience it again. So now we come to the two illusions of the mind. The two illusions of mind first have to do with the faulty or distorted operation of the mind, thought, will, feeling, imagination, and memory. And the result of this comes from our sensory impressions, our feelings, our desires, our memory, our imagination, suggestion of others. But the result of it is that because it is influenced by all these things, sense impressions and desires, it can lead to prejudice and superstition and fancy and false expectations, deceitful thoughts, hypocritical thoughts, unjust thoughts, erroneous and limited ideas. Such is the effect of the desire principle on our lower mind. The second, or class of illusion as it relates to the mind, or our sixth, is an illusion against that comes from self-identifying attachment to experience. Now, we also referred before to the illusion that comes to us from the influence of the elementals, or the skandhas, or the gunas, so that by identifying with all these attributes, we get a false idea of who we are as human beings, our personal self, and very often think of ourselves as separate beings from others. And if we could become particularly attached to the sattva guna and attachment to our wisdom and virtue, then we might become full of self-regard and pride, exclusivity, elites. And if we become particularly identified with those tamasic tendencies, we find ourselves falling into passivity, indifference, and not caring, poor judgment, inertia, poor understanding. So what is the seventh illusion? It is the illusion of spiritual perception of individual, separate spiritual being and existence. We become aware of ourselves as a self-conscious spiritual being, but still think of ourselves as separate and different from other souls, other spiritual beings. And we might say in the whole process of evolution throughout all the different cycles of incarnation, this is the ultimate goal, to realize that all souls are fundamentally identical with the universal oversoul. Universal oversoul being itself being a temporary expression of the one absolute reality. So that is the task before us in this process of self-actualization. So we're going to come then to the seventh. With mind and heart, recognize and feel the unity and diversity. And we're using here the image of a rainbow, certainly an illusionary temporary appearance, but the seven colors of the solar spectrum do remind us that all these things come from one source, the white light or the light of the sun, and certainly remind us of the unity in diversity. But it also reminds us of the sevenfold differentiation of the world and of ourselves. This was mentioned in the previous presentation. So once again, every one of these seven ideas, every one of these seven appearances of illusion has an associated key with it. And so we can remember that. The illusions of the senses, they are overcome by self-study and discernment. What is changeable? What is enduring? The difference between the perceiver and the perception. The delusions brought about by sense perceptions and feelings of attraction, impulsion, repulsion. Well, we study the philosophy of universal principles to make our heart more intelligent. We study virtues and practice them in order to make our intellect more compassionate. The passions and desires, how do we overcome them? By the renunciation of personal self-gratification, devotion, and altruism in thought, words, and deeds. How do we overcome the faulty, distorted faculties of our mind? Well, we try to study ourselves and see what comes and is caused from it, the instigation of our egotism, our desire for personal things of gratification. What is the result of I want? And what is the result of the influence of spiritual philosophy and virtue and inspiration, as covered in our previous talks? And then how about the illusion of self-identifying attachment? Well, once again, we evaluate our perceptions and experience in the light of universal principles. Before we act, when we're perceiving, we ask ourselves, is what I want to do or what I'm thinking, is it applicable to all? Is it just to all? Is it productive for the benefit of all? And when examining the lower and the lighter, the lower and the light of the higher, the dearer to us and the light of the better, learn to sacrifice the lower and the dearer to ourselves personally for the benefit of that which is higher and better for all, to make all our thoughts, words, and deeds sacred in our devotion to those higher principles, those higher needs. And the idea of separate individual spiritual existence is a task achieved over many, many lifetimes, but we can begin now by trying to practice and nourish in our heart the idea of the unity and diversity, to feel oneself in all things and all things in ourselves. So the rainbow tells us that we all come from one source, but as we see it on Earth, it's still an illusion, because the real shape of a rainbow is a circle. And if we observe the rainbow from a low-flying plane, we can see that it's a circle. So reality and illusion are relative to our plane of perception. And if we go higher and we look at a rainbow from the altitude of a high-flying jet, we see that the higher the plane, the truer our perception. The higher our state of consciousness, the truer our perception of it. And so if we were going to Google of what a rainbow looks from space, we would see that it's a ring of concentric circles of prismatic colors that either circle the Earth like a halo or circle the Earth like the rings of Saturn. And so, before we get to this slide, if you've been following along and making your own images, going from 1 to 7 with the appropriate images, you can remember every one of these indispensable steps. You could give this talk. Not only that, you could give it backwards. You could start with 7 and go back to 1. If I were to ask you what was the 4th indispensable step, you could remember the automobile with its 4 wheels and the idea of there being 4 truths of illusion. If I asked you what the 2nd step was, you remember the 2 feet standing on the ice with the reflection, that we stand in a world of illusion that is necessary, but it's also deceptive. You can use the Benjamin Franklin method of identifying one illusion with each particular day of the week, or start with the first day, and on that day you'll focus on the first step, and on the second day of the week, or whatever that day is for you, you focus on the second step, that of we talked about, or the third step, the traffic light, to stop, to wait, and to go. And every time you see a car or a bottle of soda, 6-pack of soda, it'll recall to your mind one of these 7 steps. And when you're dealing with individuals who are in pain or suffering, most people suffer from illusion. And most people suffer because desire is predominant. They suffer from the illusions caused by our sensations, desires, and feelings. And so remembering those causes and the appropriate steps to take, you'll be able to help them. This final slide really is to show where we've come in the last 3 weeks. The art of self-actualization can be represented by a triangle. And just as Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, or spirit, spiritual soul, and mind are immortal unity, individuation, inspiration, and illusion are all interconnected and one. Individuation being the process of finding that higher self, that Atmic spark and ray within us. Inspiration being open to the inspiration that comes from Buddhi. And illusion being the use of our mind, not only to transcend illusion, but to create illusions beneficial and useful for us in the future. So thank you. We're going to stop here and open it up for your questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That was a very nice roundup of our series on the art of self-actualization, and also the reason why illusion came in as the last part that we did, because in the end, the purpose of the art of self-actualization is overcoming the illusions. That lies at the bottom of the predicaments in our existence.